9:02 p.m. Emergency dispatch suddenly gets this frantic call from the apartment of the super popular TV presenter Michael Carter. Neighbors are reporting his front door is just standing wide open. Inside, dead silence. When the police finally arrive, they step into what looks like a perfect, yet totally chaotic crime scene. Today in this explainer, we're going to unpack an absolute masterclass in deception, psychological manipulation, and forensic investigation. We're going to see exactly how a carefully constructed illusion completely derailed an entire police department, and what it actually takes to break an illusion like that apart. Let's dive in.
Now, everything in our analysis today orbits around one single number: 7. See, during the investigation, the building's CCTV system experienced a mysterious total blackout. And the duration of that blackout? Exactly 7 minutes. There was no grid failure, just a surgical 7-minute gap in the footage. And this number basically became a black hole. It sucked in all the investigative logic and ended up trapping the detectives in a totally manufactured narrative.
All right, let's look at the initial parameters of the crime scene they discovered at 9:02 p.m. Michael Carter is found deceased on his drawing room floor. The room tells this really clear story of violence, right? Furniture's knocked over, there are obvious signs of a heavy physical struggle. But here's the catch: not a single valuable item is missing. His wallet, his electronics, expensive home items, all completely untouched. So instantly, this rules out a simple robbery gone wrong. The investigators immediately know they're dealing with the targeted, premeditated murder.
And that brings us to the initial assumption that literally stalled the entire case. The first forensics team comes in, examines the body, and they provide an estimated time of death. They place the murder window between 8:40 p.m. and 8:50 p.m. Now, remember that 7-minute CCTV blackout we literally just talked about? Well, that blackout happened precisely between 8:41 p.m. and 8:48 p.m. The overlap was just, well, it was too perfect. The initial investigation team became utterly anchored to this 10-minute window because it so neatly validated the camera blackout. The collective assumption became undeniable fact in their minds. They figured, okay, the killer turned off the cameras, entered the apartment, committed the murder, and escaped, all within those 7 unseen minutes.
So, with this supposedly ironclad timeline in place, the police start interrogating the building's residents and Carter's inner circle. They really quickly narrow it down to 4 prime suspects, forming your classic whodunit scenario. We've got Daniel Harris, an ex-business partner with some serious bad blood; Olivia Bennett, a television producer with professional grievances; Ryan Mitchell, Carter's personal assistant who had access to absolutely everything; and Nathan Reed, an investigative journalist who was actually right in the middle of writing an exposé on Carter. All 4 of them had incredibly clear motives. But because the police were only looking for someone who committed the crime during those specific 7 unseen minutes, the evidence just wouldn't add up. The investigation hit a massive brick wall.
Section 1. The Pivot, Detective Ethan Brooks.
So 3 days into this totally stagnant case, a new commanding officer takes over. Detective Ethan Brooks. He reviews the dead-end file, looks at the original team, and asks this absolutely game-changing question: who said the murder happened in those 7 minutes? The room just goes completely silent. When an officer defensively points to the forensic report, Brooks just shakes his head. You see, the report gave a range, but the police assumed the exact 7 minutes. It's a brilliant illustration of confirmation bias, honestly. They were confusing a forensic estimate with an absolute hard fact.
To break this bias, Brooks actually goes back to the crime scene himself, and he notices this wall clock hanging in the room. Its hands are frozen exactly at 8:47 p.m. Now, the first police team made a pretty lazy assumption here. They saw the signs of struggle and just assumed the clock was knocked and broken during the fight, conveniently pointing to a murder time right at the end of the CCTV blackout. But Brooks, he doesn't do lazy assumptions. He pulls the clock right off the wall and sends it straight to forensics. And the reality? The clock wasn't broken in a struggle at all. The battery had been intentionally, carefully removed. The killer deliberately planted a fake timestamp to manipulate the police. Armed with this fresh perspective, Brooks dives straight into the electrical control room logs. And yes, the CCTV was indeed turned off from the inside, but notice this anomaly here. The system was shut down at exactly 8:41 p.m. and manually restarted at exactly 8:48 p.m. Exactly 7 minutes. Brooks points out the impossible perfection here. Think about it. How does a chaotic murder align flawlessly with such rigid timestamps? It simply couldn't. It was completely staged.
So, Brooks pushes the forensic digital team to dig deeper into Carter's phone, specifically looking outside that assumed murder window. And wow, they strike gold. They uncover a deleted call log. At 8:18 p.m., Carter made a brief, super tense phone call where he said, "You leave, I understand everything." And then the call just abruptly ends. And you want to know who was on the other end of that crucial piece of digital evidence? His personal assistant, Ryan Mitchell.
Now, Ryan leans hard on his alibi, claiming he took the elevator down at 8:20 p.m., and initially the logs actually supported this. But Brooks spots a mechanical loophole. The elevator automatically returned up at 8:22 p.m., completely empty. How does that happen? Well, maintenance reveals that placing a heavy object in the doors triggers a safety return. So Ryan faked his exit, sent the empty car down, and slipped into the stairwell. Which, by the way, is exactly where Brooks finds his fingerprints, right in a CCTV blind spot.
But, fingerprints on a stairwell aren't really enough to prove murder. Brooks needs to tie Ryan to the immediate crime scene exactly at the time of the struggle. So he goes back to a seemingly minor detail. There was this broken coffee cup on the floor, surrounded by dried coffee. Forensics finds dual fingerprints on it, Carter's and Ryan's. Now, Ryan tries to brush this off, saying, "Hey, I serve Carter coffee every single day." But Brooks has the absolute trump card here, the physical state of the spilled liquid. Forensic analysis of the stain proved that the coffee was still wet when the cup was shattered during the struggle, meaning Ryan wasn't just there to serve coffee earlier in the evening. He was physically present and holding that cup the exact moment the violence erupted.
Section 2. Reconstructing the truth. So it turns out every single piece of evidence the first team relied on was a carefully laid trap. Stripping away that false narrative, here's how this masterpiece of misdirection was actually constructed. At 8:18 p.m., Carter makes that final phone call. At 8:23 p.m., which is long before the cameras go dark, the actual murder takes place. Ryan then simply waits there with the body. At 8:41 p.m., he disables the CCTV. At 8:47 p.m., he removes the clock battery. And at 8:48 p.m., he turns the cameras back on and makes his escape. When confronted with this actual timeline, Ryan Mitchell finally breaks down and confesses.
During the trial, the judge asked Ryan Mitchell a totally fascinating question. Why did you choose 7 minutes? And Ryan's response is honestly chilling. He said, "People trust time very easily. I wanted everyone to trust the clock, not the truth." He literally weaponized our inherent trust in digital timestamps to completely hijack the investigative process. As Detective Brooks noted, the greatest piece of evidence wasn't a fingerprint at all. It was those 7 minutes, a time frame that was never actually the time of the murder. It really forces us to ask, how often do we accept manufactured facts simply because we fail to question the foundational starting point? If the starting premise is an illusion, every logical step that follows only leads you further from the truth. The killer didn't hide the evidence. He just made sure the police started looking at the completely wrong time. Keep that in mind the next time you're presented with a perfectly neat timeline. Thank you for joining me on this explainer today. Keep questioning the framework, and I'll see you next time.